Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Drooks on Property. Today I'm going to talk about something that a lot of agents maybe don't want to talk about, and that is selling through an agent versus selling privately. And now you're saying, yeah, Drooks, you're going to now tell me private selling is never going to work, always use an agent. Not necessarily. Obviously, I feel selling through an agent is better. I've done it myself with my own properties, but that doesn't mean that private selling never works. There are certain instances, they're not many, but there are instances that I find private selling can be successful. And the number one instance where I found that it is sometimes successful is if you're in the situation where you have an acquaintance or a friend that's always told you over the years, Drooks, if you ever sell your house, please let me know first. I love your house, I would like to buy it. So you already have sort of a soft sale in place. You have somebody that you know that wants to buy your property. In that case, usually they say that, and usually they don't come up with the money, or usually there are other reasons why they can't buy. But often they do actually have a means and they do want to buy your property. So if you already have something like that in place, that's when private selling might work for you. The other instance is if you are in a very forgiving, very strong seller's market where buyers are falling over their feet to get property. There's a lot more demand than supply, and that can be a forgiving market. And any mistakes that you might make through private selling, the momentum of the market, especially if you're on an entry-level low price range, could push you through the door. But now there are other things you have to consider, and one of them is you've got to ask yourself, do you have the skills and do you have the equipment to handle selling? Now, one of the things, an agent has usually been, especially in this kind of market where we are now, has usually been in the market for a long time. So I've got a big database there in my computer and my phone. When I list your property, I already have a list of people that I can contact who want to buy in that particular area or price range. That's something that you as a private seller do not have. Then you also got to understand there's a skill set in it. Are you a professional photographer? We use professional photographers. A lot of us has a hobby with photography and we've got the equipment. Good for you, that can be done. But if you have a tripod and you have a wide angle lens and you can do it, that's great. If you have an ability to shoot professional videos, that can help you as well. If you don't and you just grab your camera, your property is not going to stand out very well on all the property portals. Once again, if it's a very strong seller's market and you're in the bottom price range of that market, the market might forgive it and push you through the door. So that is the one thing that you've got to keep in mind. And then after that, a lot of people forget there's something to the way you write a description of a property. And are you a good copywriter? Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but there is also a way where you develop a feel for the market. What are the attributes that you have to make stand out in a property? What do you put in your caption on top of a description? How long must it be? Property portals like Property24 have certain things that must be optimized. And the question is, do you as a private seller have those skills to do that copywriting? So that's the other thing. Now let's say you do get the property sold. Now there are a lot of ins and outs. A lot of people, like myself, when I've sold my own properties, I've done it through agents, even though I'm an agent myself. There is a sort of an energy clash. There is sometimes a bit of a tension between the buyer and the seller. And for a lot of people, they don't handle it emotionally well and would like an agent to be in between as the barrier in that. And if you can overcome that, once you've sold, what is your knowledge of the transfer process from when you've sold to when the property actually transfers? Is there a bond, for example? Here we have a bond originator that we connect to the buyer and we can monitor that process closely. If you're selling privately, you don't have that access. You know, at best the buyer is going to have his own bond originator, but you're not going to have access to that bond originator as a private person, and you're not going to have as tight control on that as you would normally have. Then what we often see in private selling is that the buyer wants to bring his own conveyancer, his own transferring attorney to do the transfer. Now that is usually just the motive for saving money on the buyer side, because he will pay, maybe the transferring attorney is a friend or a family member, or we do a lot of business with him and they'll give him a discount. But that can be very dangerous, because now that transferring attorney that handles the transfer of your property is going to lean towards the buyer. Sometimes it's just for saving money, sometimes it works out, sometimes it's a horror story. Sometimes the transferring attorney is, like I've said, a friend or a family member, and they don't really specialize in transfers, and that delays the transaction tremendously. If there are any difficulties, that also pops out. And do you really want to deal with that? We've got a network of transferring attorneys that we can recommend that helps you to smooth over the process. Another thing that you must keep in mind is that seller that you're buying from privately is not an agent, so he's not registered as a property practitioner's regulatory authority. That's what replaced the old EAB. So he's not under the rules of that. So you can't run to the RPPRA when that seller does you dirty. The seller is also not under the Consumer Protection Act. So he's not compelled to do a property condition report and all of those things. So you don't have that protection that you would normally have when you're dealing with an agent. So it's risky for you as a buyer as well. And the seller doesn't have an interest in a long-term relationship with you. You've got to keep that in mind if you're on the other side buying privately. The agent works in the interest of a seller, but the agent is under certain rules and regulations. And as an agent, the buyer that I have today is also eventually going to become a seller. And my success in the business depends on having people selling through me, and then having those people that bought the house come back later and sell through me again, or their children buying from me. I can't believe I'm that old. I've been in it so long that people's clients' kids are actually starting to buy. And that is something that you must keep in mind. A private person doesn't have an interest in a long-term relationship with you. They just want to get the best possible price for their property. Another thing, and I think that's something that people often miss, is you've got clashing expectations during a private selling process on buyer and seller side. You as seller, if you're selling privately, it's very obvious you're trying to, in most instances, just save a commission. Why not? Stellenbosch is an expensive area. The commission is a lot of money. I can understand why you want to save it, but you put yourself at risk as well. And there's where a communication gap comes between sellers and buyers, because you as a seller, you're thinking, okay, the house is 2.7 million. And I'm not going to pay that 100,000 commission, I'm going to pocket that. But now on the other, I'm just using 100,000 now as a random figure. On the other hand, there's that buyer and he's thinking he's selling privately, he doesn't going to pay that commission. So I only want to give him 2.6 because that commission isn't going to come into it. So you've got the buyer that wants to be discounted on the private sale, and you've got the seller that wants to gain more out of a private sale, and that's where you have that clash of expectations that makes a negotiation process very, very difficult. And the final thing when you're selling privately is the establishment of a market-related price. Now you may think, there's not much an agent does. It's simple. I just go to Lightstone, I pay a fee, I draw a report on my property, the same thing that you as an agent send me, and there will be a little map with a cross where my property is, with a lot of comparable sales around it. But now the problem is, you're going to take an average of that and you're going to go and look at a property portal like Property 24, and you're going to see what's on the market, and there you're going to arrive at a figure. Now that'll give you a ballpark figure, granted, but especially in a market that's more difficult. That's why I'm saying in a very forgiving market it becomes easier, like a strong seller's market. But that's where the experience of an agent comes in, because you have two houses in your street and you see, okay, the houses in my street, they sold for 2.5 million and 2.6 million, so I'll pitch my house at 2.550. But what you maybe don't know is that both those houses had the bathrooms and kitchens ripped out and fully renovated, and they had aircon in each room, while you do not. And that's something that a Lightstone report can't tell you, that a deeds office report can't tell you. That's where an experienced agent comes in. Maybe the one house was on the end of a street right next to a park, and an experienced agent would know that makes, let's say, 150,000 or 200,000 difference to a house's price. You as a private person do not know that. and you can end up not getting your pricing right, which is a conversation for another day. So those are the pros and cons of using an agent as opposed to private selling. So tell me in the comment sections, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you had experience of private selling versus using an agent? And please remember to, if you find this useful, hit that thumbs up, push the subscribe button. My email and my cell phone number is always on the screen at some point in time. Feel free to contact me if you want to chat about the market. And until we see each other again, happy selling.